All right, good morning, everyone. We'll get started here this morning. Get this fully projected here. All right, so this week's ECI Code of Conduct: maintain confidentiality of insider information, learn about ECI or about our clients. All right, and I'll hand it over to Matt. He's going to give us the safety news for this week.
So I'm sure a lot of you guys have already heard we had an incident on Wednesday. Jim Sharon, slip and fall, a very unforeseen situation. Glass shattered in the equipment, and he lost his balance loading out back. So he's doing really well. He had surgery yesterday. He's in recovery now. If you know Jim personally, reach out to him. He's in good spirits. He's doing well. He's got a long road to recovery, but hopefully he'll be here soon. So reach out to him if you're friends with him. So it's one of those crazy things that happens in construction. We can plan as much as we can on these hazards, but something like a windshield breaking when you're opening and closing a door, losing your 3 points of contact. It's not like it's a fall hazard, an excavation, a confined space that we're going to talk about today. Construction work is very dangerous, so we always just need to be as focused and paying attention and working together. Because even something like this, it's pretty hard to prevent something that happened to Jim. So, but reach out to Jim if you can. His number's working, and hopefully he is not quite yet.
No.
Yeah, they had some issues with PP, but he will be home hopefully today. Hopefully he's going home today. So, we'll give you his contact information if you don't have it. I have his number, and I also have his mailing address if you want to send him something. We're going to hopefully put a card out saying that we're thinking of him. So that's really all I had. Thanks.
I think you're actually probably at least 2 days now. Your count is, I think that was Tuesday that it happened. Wednesday?
I thought it was Wednesday morning. First thing Wednesday morning.
Yeah, Thursday. So
Wednesday morning.
So we're at the
today's day
anniversary
2.
of the second day.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll jump right into it. This week or today, we're going to talk about confined space. So OSHA's definition of confined space, there's 3 main elements to it, okay? It's large enough for a person to enter and work in. Has limited means of egress or access into the space. And third, it's not designed for continuous occupancy. So it's not designed for someone to be in there for an extended period of time. So those 3 things define the OSHA's definition of a confined space. And when I was learning about this, what helped me a lot from a teacher was the analogy of a 3-legged stool. I'm sure a lot of us have seen 3-legged stools before. So OSHA's definition has 3 elements. 3-legged stool has 3 legs, right? So similar to confined space, if a single leg is taken from the 3-legged stool, then it can no longer be classified as a stool. Same goes for confined space. You take one of those legs away, it's no longer a confined space. So if you improve the access, it's no longer a confined space, right? So it's just something that helped me, and something easy to think about. You think about a 3-legged stool, or you think about the tripods. Take away a leg of the tripod, it's no longer a tripod, right? So confined space entry, all confined space needs to be permit required upon when you first find it. Okay, so you need to classify it as a permit required confined space. If you've never been in there, you've never looked in it, you don't have any information on it. If someone asks you, if you show up to the job site and someone says, what would you classify that confined space in there, that manhole over there, what would you classify that as? Right off the bat, it should be permit confined space. I've never been in there. I don't have any information on it. I don't know if there's any hazardous atmospheres. I don't know if there's any mechanical equipment in there. It's permit confined space right off the bat. And until someone looks in there and does some investigation and deems it not to be permit confined space, we have to classify it that. We have to take the safety measures before we enter into it. Okay? So confined space entry work, it requires a designated competent person. So when we're planning the work, make sure that we have someone on our team that's there on site that can be deemed as a competent person. Documented employee training. So this morning, this is an awareness training. A competent person training goes to the next step up. But for this training here, this is an awareness training. But it's important that all members of the team doing the work have documented training. Somewhere we can go back and say, yeah, no, we've been over this, we've reviewed this, we've talked this, they've done the work before. So it's important that we have that documented. Saying that they know what they're doing doesn't always go as far as we'd hope. So okay, a couple other points with confined space. Identifies the field personnel, the entry and the attendant, the supervisor. So we need to identify those people. Who's going into the hole? Who's going to be manning the hole up top? Who's the attendant? And who's the supervisor? Who's going to be kind of overseeing and making sure that they have all the tools they need? They have the air monitoring. They have the air ventilation systems, air supply, air ventilation systems in place. Okay. They address the means of egress. They always have documented continuous testing and monitoring throughout the space. So that's something that we need to make sure that we're paying attention to in these entries, is that we're continuously monitoring the space with air gas meter. Okay, so but I don't know if a lot of you have seen these before, but they have these tube attachments. So when we continuously monitor space, you start it up, you give it a minute, you let it register. It'll take a little time. As soon as you let it register, it's gonna test for oxygen, low explosive limits, carbon monoxide, and anything else that these meters are set up for. But those are the main ones basically. But before we go in there, you want to pre-test, right? So you want to make sure that the hole or the confined space is safe to go into. So you're going to drop the tube down in. A lot of these sometimes don't have these tubes. You can use a piece of string or rope to lower it down into the space, and you're just like fishing. You're just going to kind of raise and lower it, right? We're not going to test the bottom of the hole. We're going to raise this up, test the lower part, test the mid-level, test the top portion of the confined space, right? Maybe lower back down, do it again, right? Just like fishing, where you're going to release your lure, bring it back up, So it's important that we do that continuously, but definitely before we enter the space as well, okay? Then we need to identify your air supply and ventilation. So if there's a space has low oxygen in it, or if it's a confined space, we've deemed it a confined space, we need to have some sort of air supply in there, a blower or a ventilation system to remove the air out of that space, okay? And lastly is having a rescue plan or a retrieval system in place, your tripods or some sort of rescue plan for the work to take place, okay? And that all comes down to the team, and that's the people doing the work. So it's important that everyone there has the plan in place. They review the plan. They know what the steps are going to be to take place, and they go to work, right? So confined space entry permit, ECI has confined space entry permits or plans. It's absolutely essential that we fill these out before we go to work every time. I've passed out a few. There should be a few floating around. Safety department always has extras up here, obviously, if you guys need them. Foremen, I definitely recommend you take these with you. Put them in your job folder today so you have them. But the nice thing about these entry permit plans is they walk you through all the steps you need to do. So you take these line by line, and it's checking off everything that you need to do for your confined space work, right? So it asks you if it's a rescue or if it's a permanent confined space, yes or no, date and time. It lists your entrance, so it identifies who's going to be working there. Site location, the supervisor, your initial air testing reading. So before you're going to work, you're doing an initial air test like we talked about. Your confined space entry review, training, any questions, everyone signs off up in here. Any potential hazards. So that's another important part of the pre-planning or the planning part of the confined space entries. So every morning or every time we go before into a confined space, we want to talk about the hazards, right? So that's just like a quick tailboard. So over at UVM Bodie, we had a confined space entry a couple weeks ago. Alex, John, Dave, Kevin. It was, I don't know, 5-10 minutes maybe. We got together first thing. We did the initial air testing. We talked about the hazards, limited means of egress, slip, trips, and falls. So you talk about those hazards, you identify them, you come up with a plan to mitigate them. How are you going to mitigate those? And then you just go down through your pre-entry checklist. You have another And then, down here is your periodic reading. So you've done your initial air test before you go into the space. You're documenting your continuous air monitoring throughout the time that you're in there, right? So you're going to note them down here. That's where you have all of that, right there. At the end, you have the time that you all left the space, all right? So those are your confined space entry permits / plans. So it's important that we always have those. Foremans, like I said, make sure you take a copy today, and just keep them in your job file in your truck so you always have them if you run into that situation, okay? The documentation side of this is big, okay? OSHA and other entities, VOSHA, they want to see that training. They want to see those plans. They want to see written proof that, yeah, we've done the training. We've been through the entry part of this. We've done the continuous monitoring, okay? So it's very, very important that when we get into those situations that we're making notes, we're jotting that stuff down, okay? So permit versus non-permit confined space. There's a lot of questions that revolve around this. So I tried to pretty much just compare them side by side so you can see all confined space require that entrance supervisors and your attendants are identified. Okay, you have an entry plan or an entry permit like we have floating around here, like we just talked about, and then you have continuous air monitoring and testing. So you have a continuous air supply, air monitoring, testing. Okay, so that's all confined space work. All right, whether it's permitted, non-permitted confined space. The only thing that really separates the permit versus non-permit required confined spaces, permitted space contains a hazard to atmosphere, collapse or engulfing hazard, or it's configured in a way that could trap the entrant or any other recognizable hazard. So moving equipment, something like that, in the space would deem it a permit confined space. All right? And then your non-permanent confined space. Basically, the only difference between the two, the big differences, is that with a permitted and a non-permitted confined space, you need to have a designated rescue team. Okay, when you get into permitted confined space, there's a lot of different things that change with it. The biggest thing being that you have to have a rescue team on site. All right, so you need to contact the local authorities and let them know that, hey, we have a permitted confined space. We need to have a rescue team. The challenge around Burlington here is that Burlington doesn't actually have Burlington Fire Department. They don't have a confined space rescue team. So you need to hire your own, or you need to have guys trained in that. I believe Williston might. I'm not sure where the closest is. UVM has a confined space team, though. So, all right. Any questions so far moving forward with it? All right. So, safe work practices. So before we work, notify health and safety to come up with a plan. All right. So it's always important that with these confined spaces, we're always talking, we're communicating with each other. So no one person is smarter than all of us combined. So when we work together, we come up with a plan together, the better we are, the more efficient we are. Okay. We can go out there with everything that we need. We know what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Okay. So we gather up our safety equipment. We complete our confined space entry protocol, whether that be air supply or air ventilation. If we need to put in a ladder, we need to have a retrieval system there, and we complete the work. Okay. The last point here, especially with confined space, we never work alone. All right. That is crucial for sure, especially with the confined space. So you heard me talking about the supervisor, the entrant, and the supervisor. So there's a minimum 3 people in that when you're doing confined space work. So we never want to go into a confined space alone. All right. That's everything I had. I don't know if you want to add anything, Matt.
Any questions?
Thanks, Justin. That's great.
All right. Let's bring up this. Yep. Okay.
Okay. So let's see, moving on. We have some promotion announcements here. We have Nate McAllister, operator, Andrew Piper, foreman. I think Nate's here. Congratulations, Nate. I know it'd be your first time today on a machine, huh? Yeah, okay. Gotten plenty of good training, I know. Well, good. Congratulations. And congratulations to Andrew out there. He's probably, I don't know if he's online or, I'm not sure. He must be in Orleans. West Haven, I mean, other side. So PT 360, we have a wellness clinic coming up the 25th of June, and that's 3 to 5 p.m. Sign up for the safety department. We have new hires, Troy Sheltra, is Troy here?
Orleans.
In Orleans, okay, yep. Oh, okay, I recognize that name. And then Paul Sabrin. Paul here? Here's Paul. Were you here last week?
Yep.
And we didn't announce it. Okay. Oh, okay. Thanks for letting me off the hook. All right. Welcome back, Paul. So several employees will also receive some confirmation from our 401k audit. Every year we have to have an audit done. And there's certain, I think they randomly select some of the participants to send a letter to and say, here's the status of your 401k with numbers and all that stuff. And if you see a problem, send it back. Otherwise, you're fine. You don't need to do anything. And then we have an article on our project that was written in Trenchless Technology magazine. That was for the Middlebury Tunnel project. Highlighted in, oops, I said in 18, that's 19, 2019 edition. And, recall it's a 360-inch diameter tunnels in rock conditions, launched from this 40-foot diameter, 35-foot deep rock shaft right in the middle of downtown Middlebury. The drives range from 140 to 152 feet long. Rock was a marble, and it was up to 20,000 psi unconfined compressive strength. So pretty tough stuff, but tough stuff can be better than crappy stuff. I'll tell you that. Third drive extended through the hard rock in a mixed space, like in this case here, the soft clay in the last 20 feet, and all that was successful. ECI used a Robbins. Robbins, a big tunnel equipment supplier out of the Midwest. They go all the way to the big guys, the big tunnels. And they provided a motorized small boring unit, an SBU-M actually it's called. Tunneling machine, hard rock disc cutters on the face. And SBU is mounted on the front of steel casings that are pushed and jacked ahead using an auger boring machine from the launch pit. And then the electrically motorized unit on the front turns as the steel casing gives the push. So the operator is inside that SBU-M and uses a laser-guided target, and he can steer by adjusting the front of the shield, and then is permanently lined by that trailing steel, and then we put in 42-inch polypropylene corrugated steel pipes. And this is described in the Trenchless Technology magazine link, and I guess the link didn't work. There's a picture from last year. The auger boring machine, piece of casing getting pushed in the rock. Can't see the guy inside, but there's one guy inside at the end. And for this week, we're profiling the Morway Moving and Storage of self-storage units. And that we were contracted by Dusevitz Construction for Williston self-storage. It's a Morway self-storage company. And the project consists of 7 different units. We're doing the concrete work. There's 44,700 square feet of slab. So like an acre, more or less, and 730 yards of concrete. So a lot of concrete, 4-inch slabs, 16-inch haunches around the perimeter of these slabs, and they're placed on poly with a 10-10 6x6 wire mesh and some runs of number 4 bar. We built, braced, and stripped. Well, we're almost done out the last one, I believe. 3,300 linear feet of edge forms, and there's a total of 10,677 pounds of number 4 bar, which isn't all that much, but pretty impressive to have 900 sheets of the wire mesh. Most of you probably driven by over here on Shunpike in our backyard, more or less. There's a little plan, 7 units, long self-storage units as you'd expect, and a lot of flat work. Pictures here. I don't know what the width is, probably about 28, 25 feet deep or so. And I don't know what the length is. It looks like a good 200 feet long or so. See a lot of the forming, the edge forming, bracing, and a lot of finish work. There's a yellow truck in there too, huh? And then from the archives, this is a 690, right? A JD 690. Yep. Well, it looks tired back then. they don't look like they do now. None of them do, for sure. I don't know. I'm guessing.
Moving tracks.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah,
What? Is this down by your house, Larry?
I think it is.
Is that where? Is there another picture with it in the through the ice?
I think so.
Yeah.
There should be one.
Yeah, there's
Or
one
maybe
somewhere.
not. Maybe not. Maybe you don't want.
Yeah, maybe they got destroyed. Yeah, what stays in the islands,
Stays
or
there.
what happens in the island stays in the island. So good. All right. Well, have a good day out there. Be safe. Looks like we got good weather. Sunscreen weather. Sunscreen weather.
Yes, thank you very
Ken
much.
Allard. John Ashton. Florian Adet.
Right here. You have a Ken Allard at the bottom?